Hello and welcome to the First Issue Club. We're your weekly comic book podcast where, just like Sue Storm, we love a good read. We've entered a season that's sometimes referred to as spooky, aka fall.
Autumn if you're nasty.
A great time to sit down under a heat lamp, crack open a comic book. Hey, these were the classic scaries. This was an OG way to absorb alternative content.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Hey, horror. The original alt content, right?
There was a time in the 30s and 40s when even being seen reading a comic book would have gotten you arrested.
Yeah.
They were as the harbinger of the devil.
They said it was going to ruin our brains. Instead, it's enriched them. Wouldn't you say, Greg?
Well, yeah. I mean, all the voices in my head love it when I read comic books. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Keep the voices in your head entertained with comic books. We should be the guys writing ad copy
for comic books, just like comic books.
The Got Milk campaign of comic books. That's actually not a bad idea. I mean, for as much as people say comic books are suffering, shouldn't there be some coalition of comic books that has a national ad campaign? We've got to keep comic books alive. We've got to save an entire medium.
They host press conferences once a month, just we want to respond to the allegations that we are dying or in some way ailing. We are totally fine. We don't know where these rumors were started, but we wanted to put an end to them right now. We're doing fine, folks.
I'll tell you something that the old US of A doesn't want you to know.
I think quite a lot, actually.
If you're an adult, you ain't gotta drink milk, buddy. It's not a necessity.
Yeah.
As you're led to believe by Mr. Adman. Comic books, on the other hand, these are tools to free your mind, brother.
The real liquid of life.
These are legal hallucinogenics. God. Transport yourself to another dimension. And if you're not going to do that with comic books, you should do it with Space Camper Cosmic IPA. Get zooted with Boulevard Brewing Company's finest IPA offering. Today, I have Chilling IPA, showing it on the camera. Really cool character. We've got Cryonic Crush is one of our new kind of superhero characters for this new version. And then we've got Off Leash IPA and this lieutenant that's a dog.
Oh, hell yes. It's finally been released and I can talk about it.
I just love. So, cheers to you for sponsoring the podcast, Boulevard Brewing Company. We love you for it. They make so many different varieties of Space Camper. So if you like hops on any spectrum, there's a type of Space Camper for you. So check out one of the variety packs and see which Space Camper you love.
And send your taste buds into another dimension. Yum, yum, gimme some down in my tum-tum.
These are the multiple taglines we've come up for
we have
Space
about
Camper
7 of them
that they're not interested in. And now our ad reads are just a string of mottos that they had just don't want to hear.
We had a pitch deck for them and we did about a good 30 and they said no thank you.
Yeah.
While slowly trying to take the contract off the table before we snatched it.
This one? Yeah.
What do you think about it? What do you think about it's not a beer, it's a journey? And they said, is that it?
All you had to do was read the name of the beer once an episode.
And say you liked it. That's fucking it.
Okay. On our podcast, as a reminder, called First Issue Club, just in case you stumbled upon this on accident.
Yeah.
It is called First Issue Club because we cover what? First issue comic books that come out each week. A lot of different comic books for a lot of different tastes and flavors. So we hope to find the right book for you to recommend if you're an existing longtime reader or if you're a brand new fan trying to find out where to dive in. We're your hub. We're also going to talk comic book news and what's going on in the industry. Sometimes maybe a little inside baseball. I've got some today that are certainly some inside baseball. Bear with us, newbies, if there's any of you on the call, as it were.
Yeah. Some of us like to know how the sausage is made, and that's okay.
Yep. Evidence we don't edit the podcast right there.
Yeah. What a gaffe. Ooh. I'm going to hear it from the fans on that one.
If you were wondering. Okay. I've got some news. Do you have some news?
No.
Okay. I've got a long list, so this will be good.
Good night.
I didn't need any of your news. I have plenty of my own.
Good. You can't have it.
The Comic Mint. Are you familiar with them?
The retailer, yeah?
Yes, they're an online retailer that sells comics. One of their things is exclusive covers. So the way this works is they'll order like 2,000 copies of a Marvel comic, and in doing so, they have the opportunity to have their own custom variant that you could only get from them, and they can charge a premium for it. So that's kind of their bread and butter.
Okay.
The Comic Mint is moving into the publisher game. So they're calling it TCM Press. They've got 3 titles. They're all getting kickstarted.
Turner Classic Movies.
Let me break this down for our listeners who are like, oh, that's a novel idea. This is an online retailer that's selling some cool new comics. There's a reason Greg groaned. And a lot of times these comics are excuses for these places to continually create a bunch of variants with like one comic book. So number 1 of this will get like 40 covers, and they'll do parody covers of different superheroes that like you want to buy either a funny cover of or kind of a risque cover of. And they just get like, you get inundated with them pushing this thing that's like, it's their version of what they're doing with Marvel and DC without having to pay Marvel and DC money, right? They want the exclusive cover. They're creating it themselves. A lot of times these comics are straight up like Zenoscope flavored garbage. If you're familiar with the publisher Zenoscope, which makes these like sexy grim fairy tales, Alice in Wonderland, like they basically take like kids stories and make them sexual, which is like, ugh. Can
really
you
sex them
like
up.
a worse taste in my mouth? So I'm not too stoked on this, and this seems to be a trend among online retailers. Unknown did their own
Whatnot
comic book. Whatnot does this. It does just, you get inundated with covers. Whatnot comics seem to be of a higher caliber, I'll say. They're not just like, there's actually a comic book in there, at least, right?
Are they still making them?
No, I don't know that they are, to be honest. They did that like Quested thing.
Yeah.
They did a comic with Wesley Snipes.
Alpha Betas.
Those were good. Those were good comics. I mean, the Wesley Snipes one was, we joked because it came from the publisher Whatnot.
Yes.
That they made What Not to Read.
What Not to Read.
But the other ones I think are okay.
Yeah. Sure.
For what they are. Just buyer beware on this. We talked about a version of this on the Patreon last week. So if you're a Patreon subscriber,
oh God, yeah,
we had a whole conversation about an online retailer who will not be named that is like despicable about doing this.
Just
like
scourge of the earth.
Exactly right. The grossest corner of the internet. So we'll see what ends up happening over at the Comic Mint, but I'm not very optimistic about it. Try to stay positive on this podcast, but we'll see. Okay, Cover Price. I thought this was interesting. They launched. Oh, I guess first for Cover Price, if you don't know what it is a service that you pay a monthly fee for, and it tells you basically like what the trending values are of comic books based on historic sales.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get kind of like long term, what was the highest sale of it in X condition, near term, like has it been going up recently? Is there a bubble? And comic book shops use this to price their comics or update prices regularly, and fans use it to see what their collection is worth or make sure they're paying the right amount for a comic book on eBay, all that good stuff. And they're getting more and more unpopular, they're becoming a big player in the hobby. They release great articles, great content, blah, blah, blah.
They're kind of seen now as like the standard for fair market value. Like,
yes, there are. What is that other app that has like the low, medium, high?
CLZ?
No,
and Cover Price?
It's not CLZ and it's not Cover Price.
Oh,
Cover Price is the one we're talking about now. There is this like kind of like key
collector.
It's Key Collector. Their price estimates are really bad. Whereas I think Cover Price has found out a better system with rapidly integrating sales from eBay, maybe even like Facebook Marketplace sales, like anywhere they can like gather data from on what's sold recently.
Mm-hmm.
And they are moving into kind of like a software as a service space by launching a portal for comic book shops that allows curated product listings to be automatically uploaded to online stores. So imagine you have a comic shop, Greg, and you're just like, I've never been able to like, it's so much work for me to put together like an email of like, these are all the books for final order cutoff. This is the last week you can order these comic books.
Right.
Here's the list. Here's the link to our shop where all these things are. And here's a way for you to submit your orders so we can quantify how many to put in place to reserve one for you. Basically, this new service just like does that for people, and it populates on your website.
Okay.
Which I think is like a game changer. I mean, I think about like how many of the big shops now are just like, sorry, we didn't list on day 1, 2, or even 3 because, you know, we got too busy. So pre-orders are up kind of late. And it's like, man, this is a huge retailer. And they're like, there's no automatic system in place for this. I think there's just in the background, there's a little bit of archaic infrastructure.
Oh,
for
1000%.
comic book stuff. And the technology is finally catching up for a lot of the retailers. And there's room for like a company like this to just like completely monopolize the market because of that.
Well, definitely evens the playing field for local shops across the country of just like,
oh yeah,
now my customers can have a better experience because we have a up-to-date website that they can either peruse or look at, you know?
Right. I mean, how many times, like when I go into when I used to do the brick and mortars more, I would go into a shop and be looking for a specific first issue, and they would be like, never heard of it.
It was Batman.
And you're like, well, dang, I was really hoping to get it today. And they're like, yeah, I don't know. We didn't order that, I guess. We don't have it. And then you look through the shelves and you're like, there it is. It's like on your shelves, but just like tucked in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
And
give them a break. They're tired.
But there's just so much inventory and stuff like this that people don't understand what they have. And so much opportunity for a service like this to like cue people in. Yeah, let me look on my website, see how many of those we got and what came out this week.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's we talked for a while about how can we get technology to work in favor of local comic book shops, because those people that own those shops have been making orders with pencils and notebook paper for so long that it is kind of cool to see.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to call it like AI, but like there's like just like automated things like set up to pre-list books for you, right? Is that what's happening?
Right. And don't you love that First Issue Club, the podcast? You know, most of your podcasts. Oh, Lady Gaga was pretty good in Joker, I guess.
What podcast are you listening to?
This is every other comic book podcast except for ours. We're talking about serious industry-altering trends. We're talking about online retailers as publishers. We're talking about COVR Price's new online portal for comic book shops. Where else are you getting this inside industry information?
Nowhere. We're brave. We're the only people that are brave enough to do it.
Not at this guy's podcast. I don't know. I thought Lady Gaga was pretty good. I was worried it was going to be a musical, but she's like a good actress.
God.
That's what they sound like.
Nailed him. Got him. He caught a stray. Didn't even know they were getting shot at.
Greg, this week Fantasma is burning up the charts. Do you know who Fantasma even is?
Is it a computer-generated K-pop artist?
Well, that sounds like that's a good name for a AI influencer. No, sir. Fantasma is the newest member of the Ghost Rider family of superheroes.
Oh, okay.
It has been teased through variant covers and small appearances in annuals for a while now. Kind of showed up in the background of that Timeless comic.
Mm-hmm.
That was a part of like a kickoff of a Marvel event forever ago now.
Yeah.
So wild to have the first cameo appearance of a character be like a year before the first full appearance of the character.
The ultimate slow burn.
But they did a Marvel Voices book, which, if you're not familiar, is kind of like Marvel giving opportunities to writers of different cultural backgrounds who normally may not be able to expose their cultures to superheroes and superhero communities in the mainline comics. Like, this book's purpose is to create opportunities for more voices in the space, thus the name Marvel Voices. So this one was centered around Robbie Reyes, who is our Hispanic Ghost Rider character. And this is a young woman who is like, looks a little more like a pixie motocross kind of style character. Like, has like much more like slick helmet and kind of like silvery outfit, instead of like the gloom and doom, like Hellfire characters that you normally get from Ghost Rider. And I love this as like a continuity, or like the visual dynamics between the characters.
Sure.
Where you have the old school Ghost Rider now, who is just like skull, leather jacket, fire. And he's riding a
classic look, though.
And he's riding a motorcycle, right? Like, that fits. You've got Robbie Reyes, who is your young Hispanic man, and he's got the kind of like West Coast Customs muscle car, and when he turns into his Ghost Rider version, he's like a chrome skeleton. Like, that whole aesthetic matches really well, and I think there is something holistically different, and it's such a huge corner of automotive fans, is like the slicker, I don't know if it'd say motocross, but like the like ninja.
Hold on now.
Yeah.
Is her mode of transportation roller skates?
Fantasma.
I'm looking
Ghost
at these variant covers here for Fantasma, and it looks like she rides on fucking roller skates, my guy.
She's got roller skates on and a skirt. This character design is so rad.
No, I dig it. This rips. This is cool.
But it's like a motocross helmet
Yeah.
with
It reminds me of roller derby.
Maybe it's supposed to evoke roller derby more. I thought this was a motocross character, but you're right. It does look like roller derby.
I'm in. I'm all in.
So this book is already selling for like $10 online, which you're like, I don't know, $10 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but for an open order book, which means a store can order as many copies as they want, they're not limited, that everyone knew a first appearance was going to be in, so it got pre-ordered out the wazoo. Like, the fact that it's selling for anything above cover price is kind of wild.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of shows you just like the moment, and when people actually get to read it and how excited they are about it, that it creates a fervor for something that normally collectors are like a little blasé about because there's so many copies of these available. So cool to see. I feel like this is kind of like a moment for a very niche new character.
Yeah.
All right. Co-signed by Greg with a yeah.
Check. Co-signed.
Okay. One thing we haven't talked about on the podcast that has been discussed via our Discord ad nauseum is the beauty.
Yeah.
Congrats to some of our local creators. Jeremy Hahn, who we had on the podcast. We had the pleasure of having on the podcast a while back when we used to do more interviews, and Jason Hurley's Image comic book, wherein there is an STD that makes you beautiful.
If only.
You like cut weight really quick and develop a lot of lean muscle like almost overnight. And so everyone's trying to get this STD, and then we have enough time once it becomes like a thing that people are aware of and trying to catch that there is a more like sinister side to it. It's a really compelling, like fun sci-fi story, I think.
Right.
And it's told through the lens of some detectives who work on cases related to the STD. And the slang for this STD is the beauty. I caught the beauty. So yeah, really excited for those guys to have a show. The point of contention on our Discord was that Ashton Kutcher has been cast in it, and I think people are kind of like not so sure about Ashton Kutcher lately because of a couple like controversial
a little sus
things in the news.
Some sus behavior from Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah. I read something the other day that said the connections to P. Diddy weren't founded, but who knows? I don't know. I've read you read a million things on the internet about these people.
I'm more concerned with the Danny Masterson stuff.
Yeah, the Danny Masterson stuff was bad. I think they stood behind that guy, and it was pretty obvious he did some pretty horrid
heinous
stuff.
Shit.
Yeah. You don't like that. So, I don't know. It's one of those things where you get really excited for the people who made something and you want it to be successful, and you get excited to watch something you read come to life, and then something like this happens and you meet like a moral crossroads with like, I don't know what my relationship is with that person who's involved in the creation of it. And it's one of those things, like, people have this conversation all the time with all the Harry Potter stuff, that they're making a new show now. And
Caitlin told me about that the other day. I was flabbergasted.
I kept hearing a lot of writers were turning down opportunities to pitch scripts for it, because they're just like, ultimately this puts more money in J.K. Rowling's, is that her name? Pocket, and she's an extremely transphobic person that keeps doubling down on that. And it's like, you know, there's this thing that people love, and you want to be able to divorce your experience with it from this person because it was part of your life, part of growing up, just like a lot of different like folk tales and things are. Like that's so popular now, it's almost like transcended like modern modern media, right? It almost feels like a mythos of its own that is like it's been around a lot longer than it actually has. And it's a thing that can create jobs for a lot of like cool people and tell an interesting story and provide like a richer landscape to this thing that people love. But at the same time, so much of it is spoiled by, the
one person that created it.
By the person that created it, or in the case of this show, just like someone at the center of it that just feels like a bit of a moral conundrum for people. So I don't know. I hope that gets... I hope the best for these creators because they're so rad, and I hope the show's successful for them.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's tough. I'm not envious of anyone involved.
Yeah, right.
To be honest, it's just kind of...
That's tough to navigate.
A not fun pill to swallow.
But it's a Ryan Murphy show on FX, and Ryan Murphy is like a mega producer. I know I see that name all the time. So
yeah, didn't he do like all the American Horror Story stuff?
Yeah, I think
so. And Glee.
Yeah, right. Has made a ton of super popular shows. So great to have like the name of somebody, like that behind it.
He did that new show Grotesquia with Travis Kelce.
I think Grotesquerie.
Grotesquerie, excuse me. I forgot it was about a kitchen.
I think. I don't know. Is that out already?
It's coming out soon.
Is it a Hulu exclusive thing?
Oh, I have no idea. It's FX.
Okay. So it might be on Hulu if it's an FX show. These are so hard to keep track of. That's a whole nother podcast.
I only care because Travis Kelce's in it.
And we're in KC. Hey, speaking of, let's do our little sports corner. Royals.
Yeah, love it.
In a division series. How about it? The whole AL Central. Congrats to our all our friends in the AL Central, and we're rooting for everybody until we have to play.
Until we lose and I can forget about it. I recently saw a stat that said Royals are the first MLB team in history to get a postseason appearance with 100 losses in a season. And I was like, is that really a brag? Like, what? Why do we need that stat?
Yeah, it's funny. So we got the Guardians are playing Detroit and Royals are playing the Yankees. So it's going to be a fun week in KC. It always gets crazy rowdy out and the bars get really full and the atmosphere is just electric in the city when we got a team in the postseason. It's really exciting.
I'll say this: if we end up sweeping the Yankees, I will be so obnoxious because then it's like real. It's like we have one more series and then the World Series. Like I'm being very, trepidatious right now. I'm not going to get excited. It was cool we won the wild card, but if we go any further than sweeping the Yankees, I'm going to be a mess to deal with.
That was exactly what the 2014 run was, where Royals won a wild card game to get into just barely squeak into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then didn't lose until the World Series.
Yeah.
Just
sucked.
Absolutely nuts.
They were on some fucking heaters.
Yeah, they were. All right. Enough sports talk. We'll save that. We've got a corner of the Discord for nerds who also are sports nerds.
Yeah.
So always a constant promotion to join us over there. Okay. I'm going to throw to you for comic talk, and then we'll save DC All In for last because we both read that.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of just to touch on that really quick as a transition from news to comics. Big event book that is kind of setting the tone for DC's new jumping on point for a lot of their series and a handful of new series. So big tone setter, big moment. That's kind of like news in itself that this got kickstarted this week.
Yeah.
Let alone the issue. But we'll talk more about it in the first issue later on in the show. So stick around for that if you care about the trajectory of DC storylines. Greg.
Now we're into comics. The first issues for which our show is named after.
That's right.
The first book I read was Hyde Street. by Jeff Johns and Ivan Reyes and Danny Mickey. It is part of the Ghost Machine imprint on Image, which is spearheaded by Jeff Johns.
Yep.
This is like basically a what's the creepy black and white show? I just had it in my head and now it's gone.
The creepy black and white show.
It's a TV show. Oh my, Twilight Zone. There we go.
Twilight
Wow. That would have been embarrassing if I couldn't. You know how you get old and your mind just blanks?
I was trying to think of a modern show that was black and white.
No,
Not
we
the
live in
Twilight
2024.
Zone.
Those don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
This is a take on the Twilight Zone. Hyde
Okay.
Street is like a strip of a street that exists kind of outside of time and space that you stumble into.
Yeah. It's an all-time fictional street.
Yeah, and you're top 5
It's
fictional streets.
On a Hall of Fame of fictional
Yeah,
streets.
somewhere on there. Hyde Street is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially it's just like it's where like you're kind of like judged or like your comeuppance, you have to like pay for them or something. And the two main players that we're dealing with right now are Mr. X-Ray and Pranky, the little Boy Scout looking demon character that just is running amok, causing pranks.
Wait, are these new Hyde Street characters, or are these characters that exist in the Ghost Machine imprint?
So these are okay.
Ghost Machine is an imprint on
yes.
Image Comics. I don't.
First of all,
did we already
yes.
say that? Yeah.
To your answer, these are new characters within the Ghost Machine world.
Okay.
This is our first time seeing them.
Yeah.
Will they show up in other books? Probably. If I know Ghost Machine like I think I do, they will. And so the point of entry here is essentially if you like Tales from the Crypt or, Twilight Zone or stuff along that kind of storytelling of like a monkey paw situation where, you think you're getting one thing, but in reality you actually get the worst version of that.
Yeah.
You'll love this book. I had a very fun time reading this book because it sets you up for eventually more and more of these like topsy-turvy stories of parables to be introduced and walked through.
I love the character design of this Mr. X-Ray character.
Dude, his glasses are sick.
He's got like spin wheel glasses that are kind of like,
like you ordered from the back of a comic book.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of his backstory. He was the one who created those advertisements in the back of comic books.
Oh, that's great.
And one of them
to like pull people into his like.
Well, no, like that was his job before he was on Hyde Street.
Oh, okay.
So he was like part of like the advertising blitz to do that.
Okay.
And it's funny because one of the ones that he was really trying to pitch really hard was the mail-away monkey that you could get from comic books back in the day.
I love it.
And so one of the scenes in the book is
I'm obsessed with this old ad in comics.
The monkey's like mailed to them so they could see how it works or like if it lives.
Yeah.
The monkey jumps out the window. And so since the monkey died on the same street where like Hyde Street is or whatever, Mr. X-Ray and this dead monkey live on the same street, just like constantly bickering with one another while on Hyde Street. It's just a bunch of madcapery, hijinksums.
So is Mr. X-Ray like an ongoing an ongoing story that exists in Hyde Street, or is he like the crypt keeper?
So how I'm reading it is Mr. X-Ray and Pranky are two of like okay, so in hell there's the devil, right? And then there's like lesser demons.
Yep. I'm following you there. Hey, if you ever need me to understand something, throw out a hell analogy. Who's the devil in this scenario?
I know you. I've known you for so long. I've had to pare everything down to biblical references. That's how you see the world.
Put it in Beelzebub terms.
So there is a devil, right? We don't know who it is yet. There is like a main person who created Hyde Street.
Who it is?
We don't know who created Hyde Street. We'll eventually know, but we don't know now. But
okay,
Pranky and Mr. X-Ray used to have their own separate lives as like a Boy Scout and an advertising rep.
Yeah.
They fell into Hyde Street, and now they're at like the whim of this main character in Hyde Street to like cast judgment upon people who wander into Hyde Street.
Yeah.
So Pranky, the little boy, is loving it. This is fun for him. He's a little demon now. He gets to hurt people. A-okay with him. Mr. X-Ray is trying to find a way out of Hyde Street.
Okay.
He's done. He doesn't want to do this. He didn't sign up for this.
I can tell I don't like Pranky.
Yeah, Pranky's the Andy Milonakis of Hyde Street.
I'm not a fan of like over the top, kooky, like murderous children.
Yeah, this Pranky's committed to the bit.
It's a trope that I could say goodbye to. But I also understand that sometimes in comics it's like, yeah,
you got to be on the nose.
Let's lean into this and be on the nose because it's kind of like an homage to vintage comics and vintage horror stories.
It's to the degree of just like Pranky's like home base, we'll call it, is a treehouse. But outside the treehouse, there's a bunch of like heads on pikes, like that he's like killed and stuff. So you're just like, oh, okay, so we're just going whole hog into this.
Yeah, all of that. I mean, the name is obviously like purposefully super on the nose, so
yeah,
I get it. He's dressed like a Boy Scout too.
But I enjoyed it. The artwork is like incredible, absolutely stunning.
Ivan Reis.
Yeah, if you had told me that this was like a Spawn comic, I would have believed you. It just flashed 90s action superhero comic to me.
All right, cool.
But it was fun. So, Hyde Street. Next I read The Creeping Below by Brian Azzarello and Vanessa Del Rey.
Brian Azzarello's been doing a lot of co-writing lately. He's had a handful of books come out with a co-writer.
Yep. Actually, him and Stephanie Phillips have a book coming out pretty soon. And I did not know that Brian Azzarello and Stephanie Phillips are an item.
Is that right?
Yeah. Publicly.
Not privately.
Publicly. Yeah, I didn't have to like snoop through their garbage to figure this out.
Their distillery comic is good. I read the first issue of that, and I kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah. This book is. Let me say this first. I liked it. I'm going to spoil it. I like this book, but I need you to know that before I get into the review. Okay.
Give me the name of it one more time.
The Creeping Below. Out on Boom Studios.
Below on Boom. Man, names for comics are getting wild.
They're getting a little kind of out there. They're kind of like Fall Out Boy song title names now. Like, just shorten it up.
Yeah.
So The Creeping Below is about this young woman who's a photographer who is in, I think, Switzerland, Oslo. And she is working in the advertising business as a photographer. But her real dream is to be like a photojournalist and to like follow bands around.
Ain't that the way it is? All these creative people, we end up at agencies.
Yeah, nothing gold can stay.
We're working for the man, but at least we're doing our art.
Yeah, you go to an overpriced art school. You have these highfalutin ideas that you're going to be the next Anne Leibovitz.
Here's my advice to young creatives out there.
Cut off your ear.
Sell your soul earlier. Wish I would have.
Why? You don't want to. You don't be a starving artist.
Right, exactly right. I hung on to the dream too long that I was gonna like illustrate children's books and stuff like that. When I should have just like got a job at an advertising agency and made bank.
Yeah. Make bank early, retire, and then
That's
make your
right.
kids book.
Retire earlier and like focus on your passion projects. That's 100% the way to think about this stuff. You don't have to. Go ahead.
You know what else happens when you sell out? You make connections.
You're buying into something.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're finding other lost souls that want to create something, and you just kind of hook up, and you make like a commune of people that when you retire, you promise yourself you're going to hook back up with these people and make something fun.
As long as you keep creating, just don't lose it.
Yeah, don't lose that spark. That's all we're saying.
Yep.
Back to the creeping below.
Yeah, sorry.
A young woman is really into the aesthetic of black metal. I'm sure Andy is listening and really bummed that he can't be in on the black metal conversation.
Yeah.
But if you're not familiar with like Norwegian and Switzerland and all those finger islands and lakes, the black metal scene there is vast and intense. They wear their corpse paint and their church burnings, and they're killing their band members and making them into stews or chutneys.
It's a lot of like Norse mythology too, right?
Yeah, and it's also a lot of pageantry.
Yeah.
I digress. So she kind of just like stumbles into this bar because her airplane, there's a layover. So she has some time to kill. She kind of gets in with this black metal band, and like they befriend her, and they're just like kind of showing her around and what the black metal scene is around Oslo. And then they take her to the woods, which, let me stop right there. Never go to the woods with people you've just met.
Yeah.
Rule A1 with a bullet.
Mm-hmm.
That's a no.
This is like that viral scenario. Remember, like from a year or two ago, everyone was like, if you were in the woods, what's scarier, if you run into a man or if you run into a bear?
Right. We talked to Jill Thompson about that
yeah, that's right.
Like 50 minutes.
Comic book legend Jill Thompson talked us through that scenario.
And
like all over TikTok.
Yeah. And to go off that, if I stumbled across a human while walking alone in the woods, I would be petrified.
Just like run in the other direction.
Oh, yeah. Like immediately. So
bear's gonna bear.
Bear's gonna bear, and human's gonna human.
Yeah. The intent. The
bears don't have intent.
Yeah. They just have instinct.
But humans premeditate.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. So in this book, they take her to the woods to like show, like the guise is they're going to show her around the country. Well, they don't. They take her to the woods, try to do some like demonic ritual as part of like this death metal thing. They inscribe all these like demonic writings, and she's flashing in and out of consciousness while they're doing that.
Yeah.
It's all very vivid. It's all very visceral.
I don't know if I could do that. I hate like kidnap, capture horror stuff.
You're dead on, and so am I. It's done in a way that is very elegant and it doesn't make you feel powerless and like gross reading it.
Okay.
Like when I read Ed Pisker's Red Room, I wanted to hurl.
Yeah.
But this is like going to be a story of empowerment, and there isn't any. I mean, yes, it's a kidnap story where they tried to kill her, right? Like, not great. But she, like, the swamp or forest that she is in is filled with old spirits. And, like, after the death metal band leaves her for dead, you can see that the forest, like, imbues her and, like, or you know, binds with her to make her something bigger than she actually is. And, like, she's basically going to be, like, this witch, it's like swamp witch thing that looked very cool. And so I imagine now it's just a story about vengeance.
Okay, does the metal band know that they're turning her into some like powerful forest being?
No, I think they were just like when she's flashing in and out of consciousness, you can hear them kind of muttering about like things they've picked up over the internet, or like just like this book that they found. Like they
They're
just think
like
they're doing black metal stuff to make themselves more legitimate.
they're like the hedge witches of black metal.
Yeah.
Do you know what a hedge witch is?
It's like a sandwich.
A hedge witch. I'll have it Mike's way.
Yeah. Can I get no bacon on that hedge witch? Mayonnaise on the side, please. Not on my hedge witch.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so in a lot of this is probably like an older thing, but I know it more from like modern spooky witch stuff, especially like in a post Harry Potter world where there's like schools and a pathway for like traditionally trained witches.
Okay.
Who become very powerful very quickly because they're like indoctrinated in this like very specific way. And then there are hedge witches who are the people who throughout the internet and rumors and pieces of old books they've found like piece together that there's something more or something magical out there, but like they've put in like years of fanatical research in their life to be able to like snap like a tiny flame that can light a cigarette, and they're just like
I've done it,
you know. Whereas by contrast, your Harry Potters are like kicking ass by the age of like 10, and so they kind of sound like hedge witches in that.
Well,
respect.
actually, they're not. They're just psychopaths who want to like carve demonic stuff into a body, and I think unknowingly did something correct. And awoken the spirits of the forest.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yes. I wasn't too sure how I was going to like this book in the beginning because it seemed kind of choppy and the writing kind of just like it. I don't know if it was purposeful or not, but like it seemed kind of disjointed and choppy. And I think that was meant to like throw you off as like to give you the feeling of this woman out of her element and out of a country she's not used to.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't take me out of the story, and it forced me to really focus more, which may be the brilliance of Brian Azzarello here. But by the end of the book, I was fully engrossed and really wanted to see where the rest of this story went.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely recommend if you're into like horror, like Last Girl Standing kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Or what was that called? Like Survival Girl or something? Or it's like the movie cliche from the horror.
Final Girl.
Yeah. So it has a lot of elements, and it's just a good book for the creepy season.
I love Vanessa Del Rey's art.
Oh, this was stunning.
If it weren't for that, I might skip this book, but because it's Vanessa Del Rey, I'll be checking this out. And then it said the description of it was Swamp Thing by way of The Crow. Which is
dead on.
Is that dead on? That's intriguing. I feel like every comic book now, for like marketing purposes, it's like it's gotta be like
it always references The Crow.
It has to be two things smushed together. Like here are two popular things smushed together. That's what this new thing is.
Peanut butter jelly, Swamp Thing, Crow, stray dogs. And then finally, I read Skin Police on Oni Press by Jordan Thomas and Daniel Gett.
Another one. What a title.
Skin Police is the best way I can describe it is Blade Runner meets Blade Runner 2099.
Okay, very Blade Runner then, I guess.
It's basically about like we're in the future now where you could clone yourself, or you can make clones, and go even further than that. They've actually started to outlaw it because it's gotten to a point now where the replicants like are losing control and going into murderous rages when they get past a certain usage. I'll say, like, after a certain time of being created.
Usage. I don't like that word. So
sorry,
duplicates are they being created for like?
No, hold on. No,
Okay.
It's not nefarious.
Okay.
Usage is just like after a certain amount of time. Sorry, I hit my mic.
Yep.
After a certain amount of time
of brain use.
They're like, they start to deteriorate and like go into psychotic episodes.
Yeah.
And so the skin police is like a subsect of the law enforcement whose job it is to like find these replicants or clones that are about to pop off and take care of the problem.
Yeah. This cover's absolutely disgusting. It is like an amalgam of body parts with a hole shot through the middle of it that's like oozing blood. It is so gross.
Yep. It's there's a lot here. It's very dense, very exposition heavy, a lot of world building. Typically I shy away from those books because it feels more like homework than it does recreational reading in my spare time.
Right.
But I don't know. There was something about this story that was very intriguing and kind of different. And I think it's because it's also paired with a cop procedural. It's not just full on like replicant hunting down like we got to destroy all these clones or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not a basic story, but it's also like nothing I've ever seen before. And at the end, you get this quick little hit of what the like underlying story is going to be, is where these like clones that are that are about to die are being like contacted by and like being collected by other clones that they thought they were going to die, but actually just need like to be amongst their own people to like level out their stress levels. So it was cool. I liked it a lot.
All right. Interesting.
This may be a trade one.
Oni, doing it again. Maybe we'll trade weight it. Is the term trade weight a copyright first issue club term? Did we come up with that, or is that something just the hobby says?
I don't know. I remember us saying it first, so
because we say trade weight all the time, and I feel like that's becoming more. I see people say it more, and I'm like, I want to say we came to that organically at one point, but maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. I'm happy to say it's a first issue club original.
I would love to take credit for like a hobby term.
Who's saying we can't? Who's going to say that we didn't? Yeah. You are hearing it first here, right?
You know,
we came up with trade weight.
Speaking of terms that someone came up with, I know there's that comedian who passed away. I'm spacing on his name, but he was the person who came up with humble brag. Harrison. It was Harrison something. And
yeah.
In any case, this one drives me up a wall because everyone just calls bragging humble brag now.
Right.
It's like, no, you have to have the humble part of it to call it a humble brag. People will just be like, oh, I got a really new car that's really nice. Humble brag.
Harris Whittles?
Harris Whittles. That's right.
Yeah, he passed away in 2015.
Yeah, he was such a funny guy. I think he had some addiction problems.
Yeah, he had a demon on his back. Yep. Yeah, he's was a huge part of Eastbound and Down, the Sarah Silverman Show, Parks and Rec.
Was a regular guest on Comedy Bang Bang. R.I.P. creator of the humble brag.
All right, Mike D. Are you going to try to convince me to be all in?
I think I want to, and I don't know how to approach this. Let's just take a second, preface some things. I feel like we could talk about this comic book for an hour, and our show has already gone for an hour. So
Yes.
we're gonna find a different way to talk about it, so I don't keep Greg up all night long. However, I could very easily go through this beat by beat because it is such a complicated book. And this is one thing that just drives me nuts. I'm already getting into it. One thing that drives me absolutely bonkers is every time the big two say, hey, we're pushing a little reset button and we're going to give everybody a great opportunity to jump in. And here's like an alpha issue that starts it all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the most convoluted inside baseball. You have to know 7 different DC events to understand what the fuck is going on. And like, lucky for me, like, I'm a major comic book fan and can like absorb at least most of this stuff.
Right.
But for a casual person who's being sold this as a amazing jumping on point, it is absolutely
the wrong book to read.
The wrong book to read. And who knows if the part where the thing that rolled the snowball down the hill was a complicated Rube Goldberg that went blip. And then from the rolling down the hill, then it's like, oh, I can enjoy a snowball building momentum and rolling down a hill and starting with a small thing and becoming a big thing, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But it was just the most complicated contraption in the world was the thing that blipped the snowflake that became the massive snowball. Like, that's maybe one way to look at this, and maybe that'll be what it is. But it seems that the crux of the story is integral to all of these huge, big picture, universal, past event tied in understandings, which makes me like really daunted by all of the ongoing books that I'm reading that I love already. And I'm like, they're all going to change because they've promising like ongoing Batman, ongoing Wonder Woman, all the DC books you're reading are going to be in service of this new storyline because it's the jumping on point, right? And I'm nervous because there's some ongoing stories that I absolutely love, right? Like, I love the tonality and everything of Tom King's Wonder Woman, and I'm like, what happens to it now? I would love for Tom King to kind of continue what he's doing. Is he going to have the opportunity to do that in DC? I don't know. And then all of these like absolute titles, which have been pitched to us as kind of like an alternate universe DC that exists somewhere, wherein all these characters that you know and love, like Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman, have different origin stories, and that has rippling effects on who they are as characters. Like, all of a sudden now, those characters are potentially going to have ties to this super complicated thing that we just, as comic fans, didn't know was part of this until yesterday.
Right.
and then you read this like 60-page comic book and you're just like, Jesus Christ, DC.
The fact that this only makes sense if you understand that at the end of Heavy Metal, the DC event,
it's
that
very heavy metal dependent. Yeah,
there's which millions of worlds.
Yeah, Scott Snyder's kind of like helming this DC soft relaunch thing,
and it's just like the crux of it is just like they've discovered a hidden world that they didn't know was there.
Yeah.
But they kind of did know, but it was still forming, so they didn't know what it was going to be.
Yes.
Like, we find out that's going to be the absolute universe.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
I was going to say, let me try to do this, like, the Cliff Notes version of what this was.
God help you, but go ahead.
Okay. The book starts with the creation of, like, a key fob to get into the Justice League.
Yes.
And they explain this key fob being created as if it were the ring from Lord of the Rings being, like, forged in the fires of Mordor. It's just like this existential huge creation, and it looks like an ID badge that's a key fob.
It's a fucking key card to get into the building.
And I was like, am I supposed to think this is funny? Like, the first couple pages, I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Okay,
it's a membership card.
So there's that. And let me start by saying this book is split into two parts. Part 1 is called 52 Days Later, and part 2 is called 52 Days Before. And we're not going to get into, like, what 52 means and the relevance of that and blah, blah, blah. It's too much.
Yeah. That's another episode in itself.
If you know, you know. So everybody, like, all the heroes kind of have an opportunity now to become part of the Justice League. They get invited to a new, like, outer space base. And they're planning to create efficiency and heroing by having everyone hang out in this base that has a transportation device. In the DC universe, it's called a boom tube.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is, the way they've kind of, like, corporatized heroing is they've got, like, algorithms that say, okay, here's a disaster that's going on in this corner of the world. We'll quickly identify whose power set is best equipped to handle that disaster. Mm-hmm. And then we've got other superheroes we can identify who have powers that, like, complement this person's superpowers, or personality types that complement each other. So they're just trying to be like, how can we be as efficient as possible and just, like, zip people back and forth to this and bring people into our, like, hero conglomerate.
So essentially they've just, like, established teams for the Justice League. You get pinged for a meeting at 11:30.
Yeah.
To stop a volcano from exploding.
It really did. The way it's pitched and the kind of significance of the key fob is kind of like they've corporatized heroing. So what happens next? There's just, like, out of nowhere, Darkseid pops in to the base and bonds with the Spectre. And you see flashes from, like, older comics, like, burning around the edges of the pages, which I think is supposed to symbolize, like, Darkseid's origin being rewritten or something, but or like his past being, like, erased. But that is, like, never made relevant or never made clear as to, like, what exactly the meaning behind that is. So that's something that'll probably be, like, trickled to us at some point.
Interesting, because I thought in the first 52 spots, the crackling through, you saw the story from the back 52. Like, so it's representing the comic book itself being ripped open.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Which you don't get that if you don't read the back half of the book.
If you go back and read the first half again, that would become more obvious. I'm glad you noticed that, because I didn't realize what the point of that was.
And that's a trope that I hate in comic books. They're just like, hey, like self-referential comic book stuff. And it's just like, no, do not do that. Stop doing that to me.
Yeah. So in the first part of the book, Darkseid is essentially defeated, and it leaves behind, like, a tear in the universe where there's just, like, this empty tear that there's just, like, time and space doesn't exist in this, like, tiny location inside of our headquarters, and it's a fucking problem. And we think Darkseid is, like, maybe dead. We don't know. He's he's just, like, disappeared out of existence and was like, Darkseid isn't. Which is, like, he says something like that, or Darkseid was. because the Darkseid is this like constant mantra, because Darkseid is like this ever-present existential personification of like death and grief and pain in the DC universe.
He like thanks them and says that he's like free or something.
Yes. Okay, so there is a key fob that absorbs anti-life energy and becomes a doorway. And Superman asks, a doorway to where? And we say, to an Elseworld. And at this point, I was like, ooh, that's kind of cool. They're finding a way to do like the Elseworld thing, which if you don't know, DC does like alternative lore imprints called Elseworld that allow creators to tell really unique stories without impacting like the formal canon of DC stuff. But it turns out this specific Elseworld we're talking about is Alpha World, which is where these absolute comics that are coming up take place. Like you mentioned, new universes were formed at the end of Death Metal, and there's still some gaps that are left that were just like a universe TBD here. Or there's something missing in the ether.
Idea not formed yet.
Yeah, and then we're finding there's some of these like lost universes that have been purposely kept off the radar by like chaos energy, basically, as it's explained to us. And one of the only ways you can visit a place with chaos energy is to have some chaotic energy of your own, which the DC universe handles with these things called tachyon particles, which are something that follow around characters like the Flash, or all of our like speedsters who are able to travel back and forth in time. In walks Booster Gold, who is probably one of our like more popular time travel characters, who always as much of like a joke character and kind of a loser as Booster Gold is, he's constantly thrust into like these positions to be like the most important character in DC Comics. It's like it's almost like an ongoing joke with DC that it's like, hey, guess what's like, if you erase Booster Gold, it's like more impactful than erasing Superman from the timeline. He's like the single most important character. So again, they've kind of thrust him into this like odd circumstance and position of being like super important. They send him back in time. He's got this little robot companion named Skeets. And they're like, hey, as long as you keep Skeets with you, you'll be fine. We'll bring you back in 10 minutes. You're just doing some reconnaissance to see what's on the other side of this rip in time. And then him and Skeets jump in. And then like next panel, he's just like, oh shit, Skeets didn't come.
Just like my son and his tablet, Skeets is nowhere to be seen.
So he's just like lost to time in an alternate universe now. And Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Mr. Terrific are back at HQ, just like, well, shit, we lost Booster.
Well, that sucks.
Like, what, do we jump in now, too? Like, what the fuck do we do?
Does he have a next of kin we can alert?
Yeah. And then in, like, a panel that has, like, zero context, you basically find out that Darkseid has inhabited this planet and has created his own legion of superheroes, but it's like an evil legion of superheroes. Legion of Superheroes is like its own DC title that and they have like little rings with L's on them. This is like the bad guy version of that. That's just part one. That's the first half of the book.
Yeah. That's a dissertation in and of itself.
Yeah. There's so much going on there already.
Too much.
Yeah, I bought this digitally, and by the time I reached the end of this, I was like, okay, I need a breather, and then flipped the page, and it was just like, oh, that's only halfway through. Which, credit to DC for giving you like a 60-page comic for $5. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. They just really wanted you to read it.
Exactly right. That's how important this new like relaunch is that they're like, we're going to give you like almost a trade for the price of one comic book. So good on them for figuring that out. We'll do the same thing with the next comic book because we got through that in like 6 minutes.
Yep.
Okay. Like I mentioned before, this is called the 52 Days Before. So we're going back in time a little bit and seeing what leads up to 52 Days After, where we're kind of like meeting in the middle, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So in this book, Darkseid finds himself with Earth's heroes week after absolute power, basically. So another event thrown in here that you kind of have to have a little bit of context for. And we assume that that's kind of like what has led the Justice League to key fob creation.
Yeah.
Is like, we can't let absolute power happen again. We need key fobs.
We need you all to sign in and log your timesheets.
So all of Darkseid's acolytes are expecting him to take advantage of the weakened state that absolute power has left Earth in. And he's not interested in this because he's felt a surge from the universe, like a calling to him from beyond that he can't quite articulate. And he's got a higher purpose and is driven to make some decisions that are like leading him towards some like end goal that he's like not completely sure of, but like he's so driven to like complete this task. So he commissions this machine from this like a historic DC Apocalypse inventor. Apocalypse is the planet Darkseid lives on. The guy who like created the mother box creates this machine for him that grants him a wish, and it's fueled by the blood of his family. Very Scott Snyder, like so like metal and like ridiculous, but like very like kind of charming in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of loved that, and a lot of the like design of it felt like somewhere in between the like death metal stuff and Kirby stuff, and I don't know. I kind of enjoyed that whole piece of it. So we ultimately find that he's being pulled to the Spectre, and he's kind of going to figure out like what he needs from the Spectre like once he gets there. And he takes a trip to hell. He fucks shit up. They don't have what he's looking for, but they're just like, we'll bend a knee. What do you want, Darkseid? You can have anything you want. And he's just like, fuck this place. You don't have what I want.
By the way, second hell reference in today's episode.
Yeah. And then he does the same thing with like heaven. He's just like hopping all over to like different planes of existence, deep diving into like the furthest reaches of time and space and lore to find this thing that he's after. And heaven is like, we can give you anything you want. Just please stop beating us up, Darkseid.
Please, sir.
And he's just like, no, fuck you guys too. And boom tubes out of there. And then he ends up on the moon, where he gets his ass kicked by Eclipso, who is like a very obscure DC reference. So good luck with like any of
Good luck with that, casual nerds.
But after getting his ass kicked, we find out that he has set a timer on a boom tube that he's placed in like the middle of a sun, and that transports Eclipso to the center of a sun and kills him. So sorry, Eclipso. Nice knowing you.
It's been real.
In your DC lore, you are now dead. On the moon, we figure out that the Spectre has been hidden and like kind of imprisoned. And what I kind of gathered is that the Spectre is such like a god force that he's been put away there by, God, what's the name of that group of heroes that we found out about in a DC event like a year or two ago that are like the space beings that kind of like
Oh fuck.
They're like they were kind of part of death metal, and like that character
Yes.
Perpetua was like
Perpetua and like
was part of this group.
weren't they like referencing like the hand or something, or like the fistful eight or something like that?
Yes.
Oh fuck.
God damn it. What are they called? In any case.
Yeah.
I think we were supposed to read into it that those powers were keeping the Spectre at bay to make sure that like nothing like this happened that Darkseid was after. So Darkseid bonds with the Spectre and becomes like the most powerful being in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And our comics merge at that point where you're like, this is where the altercation took place at the new Justice League headquarters is what we're seeing. But this time, instead of heroes fighting Darkseid, you're seeing it from Darkseid's perspective. And he's having an internal dialogue with the Spectre about like his place in the universe and how he exists as that like universal constant of like pain and suffering and evil. And Darkseid feels very opposed to this idea that he doesn't have free will and that he'll always exist as this thing that's meant to serve a purpose of a universe. And he's always at the mercy of it, and he's always going to win the right amount and lose the right amount that sustains this like equality, right? He'll never have that disbalance that he wants to create and like rule everything.
Right.
So he ultimately tries to escape this circle by letting himself be killed in this instant, which is what you realize why Darkseid said Darkseid was. And farewell and thank you, because through
Thanks
this
for
process,
all the fish.
Yeah, he's realized that like he has an escape through death where he can potentially remake and reinvent himself. And in death, he leaves this plane and enters that alpha planet plane,
Mm-hmm.
which we find is a universe like completely immersed in chaos. It's totally shitty for everyone that's there. Like all the absolute Wonder Woman, absolute Batman, and absolute Superman just have had like the shittiest go of it in like being raised and are going to be like the grittiest versions of themselves. And that's where Darkseid has taken advantage of all these superheroes. Can he create even more chaos energy in this chaos energy planet that enables him in a way that our universe or the main continuity DC universe could not? It creates so much raw power and force for him that he's going to be able to go back to his main universe with that power and take over multiple universes, finally offset the balance that has been created and dictated by universal powers more bigger than him.
Well, and isn't he like 1,000 feet tall in this universe or something?
Yeah, he's massive. It's I think what we're trying to get across is that like he's so powerful now that he can just like will himself like whatever he wants.
Mm-hmm.
He is like a god character in this universe. Much
more
like how,
so than he was in our universe.
Yeah, like almost kind of how like in Hickman's Secret Wars, like Doom was kind of like a god who like willed lands into being. That is it. That is DC's fresh start and easy jumping on point for new readers.
Bullshit.
It's really hard to stomach that as an easy jumping on point. As a well-read comic book fan, there are parts of this that like I'm excited about, and the absolute comics look rad. But there's also a side of me that's like the premise has already failed.
It's just kind of
like
the same old story in a new suit.
Yeah, exactly right. These big universal existential threats that with the same role players that we're constantly seeing in the DC universe, and things with like the Justice League getting massive and then the Justice League getting small again, and the Justice League getting massive and the Justice League getting small again. Like a lot of this stuff is stuff that it feels like we've seen before. What you're gonna get out of it ultimately with this alternate universe absolute alpha world comics are maybe more, more twisted versions of Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman that might be a little more like personal, street level. These characters are going to have more flaws that they traditionally don't have. Like those three characters are kind of like the most altruistic, flawless characters, which makes them a little uninteresting in a way. Like you kind of, that was always my thing growing up with Marvel, was those characters are very like flawed. Peter Parker is kind of an asshole and really selfish, and that's what makes him identifiable when you're like a teenager reading Spider-Man.
Oh, he's just like me.
Right. Like when you're a teenager, you're extremely selfish and see the world through like
constantly shooting webbing everywhere.
A very specific lens. And then when you would switch over and read the DC comics, it's like everyone's a Boy Scout and everyone just like, I made the right decision today, and like experience zero friction with making that decision.
Right.
So I think we're going to get some interesting dynamic characters out of this. And I'm excited for that. And my advice would be to people who like start asking me about this stuff would be like, the fact that they're telling you Wonder Woman's going to have a good new mainline, Wonder Woman's going to have a great all-in jumping on point, and so is Batman, and so are these other things. If you're not already reading those books, I think don't jump into Batman 168 to start reading that series. I think buy the absolute comics and enjoy them for what they are until they get too big for you to understand, and then stop buying them.
It's a big old rat's nest, if you ask me.
Yeah, right.
I don't think we needed an all-in event to explain the absolute universe. The absolute universe just could have existed.
Yeah,
and
right.
we could have coexisted and not referenced to one another. Like, I was all in for the absolute stuff. Like, absolute Batman looks awesome. Absolute Wonder Woman looks awesome. Absolute Superman looks awesome. But now, after reading All In, I have in the back of my mind to keep looking out for Booster Gold and Darkseid, because it'll reference the mainline DC timeline, which is fucking irritating.
Yeah, you're going to have this bizarre superhero tramping around all these books that you're just like, what purpose does he serve here?
Yeah.
And he's a straight up superhero. Like, I think if it was a character like John Constantine and he was like creeping in the background, that you would be like, oh, that's kind of cool. There's this like suspicious magic man that I like, as a new reader, I don't know much about, that like,
yeah,
there's more at play. And then you discover the intricacies of that character. Like, no, this is like Superman and gold and blue.
Yeah. And someone's going to have to find Skeets.
Yeah,
and then,
who's going to find Skeets?
And where's my Skeets series? Absolute Skeets. That's what I want.
Yeah, does Batman adopt Skeets?
Skeets. That's what it should be called.
His own solo book? Yeah,
yes.
I love it. Skeets Volume 1. Skeets.
Oops, all Skeets.
Oops, all Skeets.
Like, I don't know. It's a weird asterisk to add to this whole fun thing. DC has the knack to have a very fun party, but to only serve broccoli at the party. You're just like, man, this kegger would have been great with chips and salsa, but you have just like radishes. Yeah,
the invite sounds great, but then you show up to the party and you're like, what?
Yeah, we're taste testing like shoelaces.
Future State. Think about DC Future State.
It was awesome, but it was too short-lived. They gave it 2 months.
And it had like no repercussions.
No.
You know what I mean? They kind of set you up to think like, hey, this is what's going to happen in DC in the future. And we're doing this really dynamic thing with like, we're going to show you the future, and then you're going to go back and see how we got there. And that's going to be really interesting. And then it was like, nope, we actually did this thing where we just said all DC Comics stop for 2 months. And we're going to do completely new storylines with all of them. You're going to get invested. You're going to buy a lot of them. And then they're going to stop out of nowhere. And you're going to go back to like...
and then we're going to fire Dan DiDio. And then it's back to normal.
You go back to old DC stuff. And you're kind of like, what was that? Like, I spent a lot of money on a lot of comics that were this like weird side quest that had like 0 repercussions.
Yeah. It's
really
almost like
bizarre.
we all had the same dream.
Yeah. And honestly, if you're going to like, I'm not opposed to something like Future State happening again. I just need to know or fully understand the event at hand.
Yeah.
You got to communicate to me that like, hey, this is a 2-month diversion or 3-month diversion, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the more you read from the stories during this time, the more of a fulfilling joyride it's going to be for you. But just know that this is a capsule story with a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
And to me, a lot of the Future State books, as fun as they were, didn't necessarily like have a cohesive beginning, middle, and end. They kind of seemed like they were intended to go a little further, and then just didn't.
Well, the rumor is that Future State was supposed to be Dan DiDio's like reboot, but he got canned, and it never came to fruition.
Yeah,
but they already had all these books, so they're just like, we got to do something. So they just put it out, and it just glazed right over it.
Nuts.
Same thing happened with DC Sleepy Time Tea. They froze every ongoing book they did for the like Dream horror series, which is perfect. Because if you don't want to read that, save your money and buy more DC books when they come back.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm excited for the Absolute stuff, but now that I know there's this weird, I don't know, hook attached to it, like there's going to be a big bait and switch, and these Absolute books really aren't going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Because even with like the Ultimate Universe in Marvel, I mean, Ultimate Spider-Man went to over 100 issues.
Okay, yeah, and here's my thing. The Ultimate Comics in Marvel... Sorry, I've been drifting away from my microphone. The Ultimate Comics because I'm... the more passionate I speak, the more relaxed I get, and my posture loosens. The Ultimate books are their own thing that is completely separate from the mainline comics, and therein lies the charm and value of those things existing.
Right.
What this does is tie the two things together. Like...
Unnecessarily,
right. Like now we've got heroes in our DC trying to solve the problem of this other universe, and then there's the other universe where they're trying to solve their own problems that exist in their universe. So like my Batman has the same motivation essentially as the new Batman. Right. I want them to have different motivations and be different things, not working towards the same one storyline and the same one goal.
Right.
That's just how it reads it's going to be right now. Like you're going to have two Batmen that are trying to like defeat Darkseid.
And then we get that wacky crossover when those two Batmen meet, and we're supposed to like tee-hee at it, just like, oh, they met. And it's like,
Spider-Man pointing thing.
Yeah, the fucking Spider-Man meme. It's just like, this is pointless. This was all pointless. But at least we get Wonder Woman with a giant sword. That's all I care about.
I know the character design for the Absolute stuff is rad. Hey, that's one of the benefits of subscribing to First Issue Club podcast. We're gonna read a lot of this stuff and you maybe just don't have to. And
you don't have to.
You can stay apprised. And if we read the absolute books and we're like, these are absolute pickups, absolute musts, or absolute stinkers, we'll let you know.
You missed it. Absolute musts or absolute busts.
Or absolute bust. Shit. There's another thing. If we
now that is a First Issue Club original, and we can timestamp it.
Well, when all the absolute books drop, we'll need a catchy title like that for our episode.
Must or bust.
Must or bust. Okay, that's it. I think.
That's it. That is an episode.
Long one. There's an outro. It explains it all. Where to find us on all the other things. Goodbye.